There's, by the way, a bit of a delay. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with that. Okay, let people join us on the screen. Hey, we have Itai here. Hey, Itai. Let people join, and then we'll start in a few minutes.
Looks like we have 12 watching.
Yeah, great. We'll just give a couple more minutes and we'll start. Just also in Hebrew, לכולם, אנחנו היום נעשה את המיטאפ באנגלית, יש לנו אורח דובר אנגלית, אז לא להתפלא למה באנגלית, הכל בסדר. ניתן עוד כמה דקות ואז נתחיל את המיטאפ.
Shalom. Is that right?
Oh. Just also in Hebrew, לכולם, sorry about that.
Okay.
Started playing here in parallel. If you want to join us also on the Slack channel, we're in addition to the YouTube chat here, you're more than welcome to join us on the CNCF Slack under the hash CNCF-TOV. Also post it on the here on the chat. So while we wait, feel free, if you're not already on the CNCF Slack. It's free, by the way. The workspace is available for everyone, whether you're a CNCF member or not. So you can register, and if you're already there, then just join CNCF-TOV. And I think we can start. So hello everyone, and welcome to CNCF Tel Aviv, the local chapter of CNCF, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation here in the Holy Land in Israel. You probably are familiar with CNCF if you're already here, so no need to present that. And CNCF has local communities, local chapters. So we are the Israeli chapter of CNCF. You can find us on the community page of CNCF under the Tel Aviv community. I'll also paste it here on the chat so you can see that. So do follow the page and you stay up to date with the upcoming events and all the news and updates. And we also publish our meetups on meetup.com. So if you're comfortable with that, we've been there for years before moving to CNCF's new platform, then we still post it there. But bear in mind that to register and to get the stream, still it's via the community.cncf.io. And as I mentioned just before, if you just joined us, we also have a Slack channel under the workspace of the CNCF on the CNCF Slack. So look us up CNCF-TOV. It's also on the YouTube Slack, on YouTube chat. Sorry. And if you're not already on the CNCF Slack, then you're more than welcome to join. It's free and it's available for everyone. And also specifically for the session today, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, anything else, feel free to chat both on YouTube, and also if you wanted to persist beyond the session, then on the Slack channel, and we'll be more than happy to answer questions and engage in the discussion. I know it's a bit limiting now that we're not physical events, but hopefully to be back on the physical events very soon. But until then, more than happy to have as interactive as possible discussion with you guys. Just post the questions or comments or anything else. And with that, I would like to go over to today's meetup. And I'm really excited to have dear friend and expert, Pop Dan. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Dotan, for having me. I appreciate it. It's a pleasure. And I want to say it. I'm probably going to butcher this, but again, shalom, everyone, and such a pleasure to be with you all. Thank you for spending time with me. And Dotan.
Thank you.
More importantly, Dotan. So.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having us. Usually we're having you speaking and telling us straight from the source about Falco is a great opportunity for the local community. Just to a few words, you'll probably present yourself better, but Dan is an expert in Falco. He's also a member of a SysDig company, a dear company that contributes so much for open source, and he's also a CNCF ambassador. Today specifically, we're going to talk about Falco in particular, and in general, the challenge of runtime security for containerized Kubernetes environment. So with that, Dan, would you like to present yourself and say a few words and then give us the topic?
This is my first time on a microphone, so I'm a little shy, y'all. So this will be all right. So my name is Dan Papandrea. I'm a director of open source community ecosystem for SysDig. I work on the Falco project, which is an incubated CNCF project. It's for runtime behavioral. It's a runtime behavioral engine with outputs and rules and all that fun stuff. I want to kind of talk to you all about this, but also people have I've done this talk a couple of times this year, but I've done it differently every spot. So like when I did it in London, I did it with biscuits. And this one I'm doing with cookies. And so cookies and a different integration than the previous one that I've done. So every single one of these is different, but awesome. So I tried to use the native language of my friends in Tel Aviv, right? So in Israel and the Holy Land, right? And so basically runtime security, you need ingredients, like what are the ingredients that does this well? And so today we're gonna talk about some cookies, and this one is, and also some runtime security. But the analogy we're gonna do is you need the right ingredients for runtime security. Your first ingredient, and again, from a syscalls perspective, these are things like, wrapping into the kernel and all these things, and I'll talk a little bit more deeper on them. When you run a program, you are making system calls. System calls are how a program enters the kernel to perform some task. So processes, network, file IO, and much more. Applications, Kubernetes, OS kernel, all that interesting stuff is all making system calls, right? And so if you think about, you've heard this term, system call is the fundamental interface between an application and the Linux kernel. So that's the man page on this. The second ingredient, and you've heard this term eBPF, it means expanded Berkeley Packer filtering and Falco project. And so what this allows you to do is run programs in the kernel space without changing the kernel code or loading a module. And so accessing kernel activity without risking system stability or security. And then it's useful for security monitoring and troubleshooting. I know there's various tools out there. Dear friend of mine, Ite, has a project called Tracy's, fantastic, from Aqua. There's other ones like, Cilium. There's Pixie as well, was recently. So like using that power of eBPF, I think we'll see a lot more of that. And so it just allows you to kind of give you that pinhole and create these applications versus having to contribute directly to kernel itself. And so that to me is a very amazing ingredient for you to have this visibility and runtime security. So what is Falco? So Falco is, again, a CNCF incubated project, and it was created by Sysdig in 2016. Our founder is Loris DeGiovanni, who's one of the people that actually created something called Wireshark TCP dump. And that allowed you like introspection into the kernel and network packets and those types of things. And so what this does is it detects unexpected application behavior and alerts on the threats at runtime. And again, it is the de facto Kubernetes threat detection engine. And so what does it do? If we were to boil it down to three things, it parses the Linux system calls from the kernel, again, using the conventions of a kernel module or eBPF, and asserts the stream against the powerful rules engine. So there's YAML, right? You look at it, and then I'll show an example of this where you can take this and say, okay, this thing happened, or that type of thing, like what occurred, and I can do that in all of those system calls that I showed you earlier. It could be a network thing, it could be a file IO, it could be any of those things, right? And so there's that natural way to kind of tap into the kernel, and then alerts when a rule is violated. So those are the three things it does, and it does it very well. Recently, Sysdig, as part of we contributed back to the CNCF our rules and the rules engine, Falco itself, and then these two things. It's called Linsp and Linscap, and those allow you that direct level event parsing, filtering, and output formatting, as well as allowing you to capture things that are happening in that kernel. And so then again, these are now open sourced for anybody out there to take these and extrapolate, build out, tooling and all those things. But again, it's doing it from that system calls perspective through non-blocking event collection and type-based event packing. So those are the things, again, I don't expect you all to like understand all of these elements, but it's kind of just that's the secret sauce that allows you to get to that really high level of dissemination that I'll show in the demo, and some things you can also do in your own testing. Falco architecture. And if you look at this, this is essentially what I'm going to demo for you behind the curtain, right? Behind the scenes, right? If you look at this, right? There's that kernel module that's trapping all of those system calls. And then there's those two libs right here, right? That are basically looking at that, doing that event collection. And then there's that filtering expressions through YAML, that how we're able to do that for those, or through the Falco rules that we're gonna have. Then outputs it to the alerting aspect here, which can be, out of default, it's syslog, file, standard out, shell, HTTPS, and gRPC. However, you can output through gRPC at something like Prometheus, or through Falco, or if, shout out to my friend Dotan here, you can go out to logs.io, for instance, as an example, right? So there's, many mechanisms you could do through those conventions, or through HTTPS or file or JSON or those type of things. The other thing we've added recently, and this is actually an external contributor that created this. And again, all of our contributors are phenomenal. And I love seeing in the community, we'll talk about that, people just coming in and just adding even more amazing things to it. And that one thing is Falco Sidekick. What Falco Sidekick is, I'm gonna skip a screen. It's basically it's a sidecar that allows you to connect Falco to these many outputs, things like PagerDuty, OpenFOSS, pretty much the sky's the limit, Elastic, Lambda, all of those things. And that's just keeps on growing. I think they started this with like 4 outputs, and now it's up to 32 outputs in a matter of like a year. So it shows you how progressive the community is in creating these things. Out of the box, you get a default set of rules, and these are curated rules that, from a perspective of things that that people have contributed, from security folks to developers to operators, like privilege escalation, for instance, read writes to well-known directories like Etsy and UserBin, or if you want, like you can create like ownership changes and those types of things, because those are things that happen at the kernel level, for instance, at a system call that you can use rules to be able to traverse. Like a good example as well is Maybe you don't want somebody in a container to use nmap, right? That's it's something that you can add as a list of executables and binaries that you do not want to have run. That's how you would do it. And on the other side, you can also do things like we can also tap into Kubernetes audit. So maybe you don't want Dotan to create his own namespace. And so like you want to look at it and say, well, Dotan went ahead and did this in 5 clusters. I need to figure out why that happened. And I'm sorry to make you the scapegoat here for this, Dotan. I just, you're the only person I could see on the screen, so I had to call you out. So the third ingredient, again, and this differs from everybody. Look, you can also include some GitOps here, and this is the difference between some talks I've done in the past. Where, look, like I'm looking at this from an ecosystem perspective, and you look at Falco, and you look at tools out there like Prometheus. Be able to integrate with different things is what makes a project in terms of like being able to like adhere to different things that you're trying to do to integrate with your local implementation. So now you're saying to yourself, okay, Pop, you told me what this thing does, right? Now show me the goods, right? So I'm going to show you that. So basically we have a scenario here. I'm going to go ahead and switch over. This is my friend Dotan's precious family recipe for tahini cookies that has been passed down from various generations, right? And just to let you know, this is running in a cluster here. I'll show you this. Oops. This is get pods. This is running in I'm using something called Sivo Cloud, which is a K3S. They're a cloud provider that has like very small, like K3S as the underlying deployment for Kubernetes. But I'm running this here, and basically I'm running this very simple recipe. So if we look at this is the deployment here. There's my secret cookie recipes, and then you see how I'm mounting to this user share nginx HTML, right? So this is running here. It's deployed and all of this, and then you can see there's my HTML for the actual page. Now, I don't want somebody to thieve and do anything to this, right? And so I have this running, but also I'm running something called Argo, right? And so this also allows me to do some cool stuff. And I'm going to kind of show you the goods, and then I'll attack it. So you can see here, Falco's running. It's been deployed to you all using Argo. So I'm using the functions GitOps to be able to say, okay, here's Falco Sidekick's been enabled. The web UI has been enabled here, right? There's a beautiful web UI that's been created. That was, again, community contribution. And we look at this here where there's a rules file, and there's my cookie tampering recipe. Well, wait a second. Let's look at this recipe. Let's look at the anatomy of this rule. We see that there's my cookie tampering rule. There's my description. Then there's my condition. If you remember in terms of, let me make this a little larger. So if you look at this from the perspective of there's a condition here, like where I'm using YAML to be able to define this path here. And this is, the rules kind of syntax here. Because if somebody's touching this user share nginx directly, I want to know about it. But you know what I'm going to do here? I think I'm going to edit this because I want to kind of show you that like maybe it was rules as code. Maybe I want to kind of, putz with this a little bit. So I'm going to go Dotan's cookie recipe, and I'm going to go ahead and you all never commit to master here. I'm sorry. I'm just doing this for the sake of, this is a throwaway demo, but I'm going to do it. So I make this commitment here, and that's going to go ahead and update the rule. So I'm going to go ahead and just trigger a sync here. And this is going to sync using a rule that we create, again, using rules as code, for instance, as an example. So I'm going to do the synchronization. Oh, why is this not working? Let me see. Oops, I think I know why. Just give me 1 second. Took too long, I think, to do my port forwarding. Here we go. All right, so bear with me a second. And I can see here that these are running, and I'm going to go ahead and do the synchronize. Now this is going to look for any changes I made to my GitHub repo using the power of Argo, right? So I went ahead and this has made that change, and we can see, look, a few seconds ago I updated the values file. Remember, I just did this, right? So let's go ahead and try to attack this pod and see if our rule has been updated and see if we actually see it in the Falco Sidekick UI. So here we go. So first off, I'm going to go ahead and get pods so you can see these things are still running. And I go move, do this. What I'm trying to do is, remember I have that rule that says user share Nginx. I want to know if somebody actually is hitting that, right? So I'm going to say I'm going to move that index HTML to a hack.html, let's just say. So that happened, right? And if I go ahead and see this, let's go back to our rule and see if that rule was generated. Bear with me a second. Might take a second. And come on. Try it again. See if this rule actually. Yeah, the pod is still running. Let me go ahead and do it here. Okay, get pods -n Falco. Oops. Okay, see the pods had restarted after having that change in 36 seconds. I'm going to go ahead and try this again. See this. There we go. See that? Dotan's cookie recipe has been tampered with, right? So we found that out. And again, we see, you see how we made that change to the rule? I mean, it's a simple title of the just bear with me a sec. So it was a simple like update of that rule, right? It was just the name of it. But think about this. If I had rules as code, and let's just say I was hit by something, I'd be able to define this and be able to show this. But now it's showing me here, it's showing me the container ID this happened on, the namespace this happened on, the pod name, exactly what was touched from the event orgs, the actual pathing and all of that here. And that's shown for you right here. And again, all I've done is a simple, and by the way, this is a blog post that we just, if you go to falco.org/blog, you'll have a step-by-step on everything I did. It's literally a Helm chart deployment. So it's very simple. Now, being able to update rules is great, but what if I want to be able to like, you know, I want to get like, I want somebody to like, if they try to exec into my pod, I want to kick them out because I don't want Dotan's amazing family recipe to be stolen. That's an obvious thing. We don't want that to happen, right? So here we go. And I'm going to go ahead and try to exec into one of these pods. So let me go get pods, and there it's running. And I'm going to go ahead and go exec nginx -bash. I'm in this pod here. Come on. All right. And I'm going to more, for instance, Etsy shadow. And they're seeing this. Try this again. Just trying to kick me out. It's not. All right, so if I go to my flow here, right? Basically, I've built an Argo level flow that's going to say that if there's an event that happened, like a terminal shell into a container, that's one of the rules that's here. It's going to trigger a delete pod process here. And this is going here, so. There we go. You see how it's terminated that container that I was in? So look, it basically, when I was in there, it pushed me out of that, right? And it basically exited me, it terminated me out of the container. So let's go ahead and see this from this perspective, and we can look at our event flow. And we can see that, look, 15 seconds ago, a pod was deleted, right? And this is showing me the reason why, is because that was the pod that I was in. So we're using the power of Argo, for instance, and Sidekick to be able to give you that trigger. So I'm going to go back to my slides here real quick. So our cookie thief here, that was a detection. And I showed you that we were able to use a rule and update the rule. And then there was a notification, which I showed you in the UI. You got that beautiful notification. Again, you had that syntax description, and then also having it respond to a threat. Like now I can use that to trigger a function like kubeless or OpenFaz or Knative or AWS Lambda. And guess what? You know what that means? That means you can code any function that your heart desires if something happens. So think of the logic there. Maybe I want a mem dump. Maybe I want, I don't know, to trigger a network policy, like a Kubernetes network policy, to bring me to, if this happens, to put me in a canary pod or something like that. The sky is the limit. So you can create this whatever you'd like from an actions perspective. What I showed you, again, if we go to falco.org/blog, it has the full steps. But if you just want to get up and running right now, simple Helm chart, Helm install, enable the UI, enable a sidekick, and then create the namespaces to literally one command, then you're up and running in your cluster. If you want to contribute to Falco, you can go to getting started in falco.org. You'll see, all of those things. And then, as well as, like, there's the Falco project in GitHub, and also getting involved in the Falco community. I think, again, I think, Dotan is familiar. He's an awesome elder statesman from the community perspective. So, and also it's great to see, like, Ite and others, in the group. I think we're all making a great thing for a common community to have awesome, projects that we're all very focused on the end users, which I love about it. And then if you need to, like, join our Slack, we're on Kubernetes Slack, Falco channel, and also you can follow us on Twitter. But in terms of contribution, it doesn't mean that you have to contribute and be like a full, kernel level developer to understand how to contribute to Falco. You can also do integrations and tools, just like, Sidekick, for instance, rule sets. If you're a security person who wants to create some rule sets based on there's documentation on how to create those rule sets. And also documentation webs. If you want to update, hey, I tried this, doesn't work, and I wanted to be able to update this because this is what worked for me, please feel free to contribute from that perspective. All right, any questions? Any thoughts? I'm gonna stop sharing.
First of all, amazing talk, and it's just amazing to see how much it advances from each time I hear about the project. The advancement that the community makes is really amazing. So really great. By the way, just curious to hear how many of our audience, you can just vote up or down, use Falco today in any way, shape, or form. Curious to hear. Just thumbs up. You can just use that with the icons. Thumbs up or thumbs down. Just curious to see how many of our members. You get some compliments on the way on the chat there on YouTube.
Props, Asaf. Good to see you, Magno. Ite, always a pleasure, man. Heart back to you. Yeah, I mean, again, what I love about, like, what you mentioned earlier is if you see all of those things, like, again, contributions from you, logs.io, awesome stuff that you've done, and you've been a tremendous, contributor. That's what makes any community great, is being able to respond quickly to things like this. Again, we had somebody, the Knative blog was written because, somebody was like, I really like Falco. I'd love to see how you can integrate with something like Knative or other tools that are out there. So, that's the thing that, like, that's cool. And also, I just love the fact that, there's other projects that want to also get involved from the Falco with Falco. And I love that because I want to nurture that, because I love the community in general, beyond just Falco. I love the CNCF in general. Like, we have such a tremendous opportunity to do what we've been doing from a leadership perspective and an open source perspective. Like, it's amazing the amount of work that's, like, if you look at Kubernetes, you look at Prometheus, you look at OPA, you look at all of these great projects. And guess what? The benefit of that is because the community is getting involved in it, and they're making things amazing. And that's what I love about it. Yeah, no, it's amazing. By the way, we can see some of the members here, Itai and Magno and Noah and others that use it. So apparently we have some in the audience that are already playing with it. And I think the amazing thing is first, the integration. You mentioned being able to plug in logic, a serverless type of logic. It doesn't really matter if it's a Lambda or Fast or anything else, but the power of being able to just trigger a custom workflow that will just start and launch and do automatic remediation or downstream alerting or any other thing. This is, I think, the power, because it becomes a platform. It opens up the whole suite of opportunities to take it both in terms of investigation, in terms of remediation, in terms of
of your containment. So I'm just curious to hear what types of logic that you hear from your customers, users, from the community, that are typical ways that they actually implement them.
So, I mean, the first thing that I demonstrated was that rules is code, right? Using that and being able to say, because what happens in any type of, violation or some type of like outbreak or external actor, it's always like somebody follows a trend, right? And then what do you have to do is basically look at this like, okay, let me update to be able to a rule set to be able to address said threat, right? A CVE, those types of things. And so that to me is like, okay, being able to react very quickly to it. That's one use case I would say there. And I'm from the functions perspective, the ones that the example that I have is again, there should be no reason why somebody has to SSH into or terminal into a container. There should be no reason why, unless it's, deep, maybe they're, they should be doing that debugging aspect in a dev instance or anything like that. And so if it does happen, right, if you do need to do that, you need to have some levels of protection. And so that's where terminal shelling in, and then if there's something that is external or somebody external actor, what do they do? They terminal in, they drop their tool in, and they get out. It's like those are things that are syscall related, right? SSHing into it, writing to a specific, directory that that payload, right? And so that to me is something that's significant. And then the other one, like I said, is just that that detection, and that's where like Sidekick UI is really awesome, because it's like you can immediately, you saw that I immediately triggered that thing, and you immediately saw it. You also saw like the metadata information pretty quickly. Now think about that. If you have like 10 clusters, how am I going to find the cookie thief very quickly, right? And that's why I use that analogy, because sometimes security stuff is kind of boring, right? Let's be honest, right? Like it's it's just in terms of from a explanation perspective, right? If you do it in a fun way, people will understand it, and so that's why I kind of use that analogy.
No, I like it, especially since again you have the template, sort of the cookie cutter, but then again you have the variations for the instance. But what I think on the visualization is very engaging, but thinking about it in scale, really I think the power of automation comes into play, in which you can, as much as possible, again you can't have fully automated remediation or things like that, but the more you gain knowledge within your company, within your I don't know, maybe even an MSSP that is external to companies and provides it as a service and has a lot of know-how, aggregated know-how, and can start automating that. That's something that can become really, really powerful. And also, the customization per customer or per type of environment and deployment.
One of the things I heard when I came over to Falco full time was that this thing will tell me what's going on. It won't do a certain thing. And I'm like, yeah, it does. It has that capability. It's just, I think we need to make sure people know about it. And sometimes it's hard to hear your baby's ugly, right? It's hard to hear that, right? It's like, and I'm sure with Logs.io, you've seen the very similar thing. And I'm sure like Ite out there's heard those things, but on some of the projects he's worked on. But it's like, sometimes those are things that are focused on things that help you make a better project and a better product, right? Being able to find those things out, and and that's why we had this series. Like I said, we call it the Response Engine series. It's 6 parts. If you go to falco.org/blog, you'll see there's 6 parts of it. Things like OpenFast, things like Knative, Kubeless, and the list keeps on growing and growing. And again, what I love about it, it's not something initiated from like the main maintainers. This is literally like the world, the community coming in and saying, oh, you know what, this is cool. Let's do this with Argo. Let's do this with Flux. And so it's expanding beyond just functions now. It's like, okay, now I want GitOps functions here. I can do this. And so like, I got some of the folks from like Kepton gave me a note, and then shout out to the Kepton folks. They're fantastic. And they were like, hey, we'd love to do something with Falco and Kepton. I'm like, cool. Let's do it. Like, what I mean? Here's some examples and go, right? So that's the beauty of it. And again, just working with the community, again, getting folks in the community involved and looking at those integrations and saying, this is something I can use. And one thing last thing I'll say, on the Knative blog, I thought it was really cool because it was basically, look at the CNCF projects that are out there, almost like an a la carte menu, right? You got this, and you can say, you know what? I'm going to take this appetizer, I'm going to take this and put it together. Then because you have all the elements out there, they're all there. And so you could, hey, I can use Kubebench and Trivy for my vulnerability management and all of those things. And then I can use Falco. and then I can use this or Tracy. It doesn't matter. Like at the end of the day, you have all of these tools, this a la carte menu for you to create your security posture. So yeah.
And I think one of the points that you raised, that the ecosystem there in the CNCF is really huge and the selection is wide. But I think the integration between the project is key, because when you want to pick and choose, as you said, take this, take that, and take that, you would also like as much as possible to have this seamless integration between the project. And we know, each project has its own, it's its own bubble and its own space, but having these inter-community integrations creates something that shows then the real power of CNCF, the integrated power. So I think the fact that, yeah, as you said, people reaching out from Captain and saying, hey, let's create the integration here, or from Argo CD or others, this is where the pick and choose that you mentioned becomes really practical, because it comes like, you deploy, you have a Kubernetes, and then you deploy Prometheus, and it's so seamless, such a seamless experience. You would like ideally to have each and every project have such a seamless experience with each other. So
that's the nirvana we're trying to go for. But you think about like security from a future perspective is open source. Like it's just, that's the reality of it. If you think about it, like again, being able to react to things much more quickly than any closed source projects, it just makes no sense. If there's nothing seeped in that beginning basis of open source, it really will not, you will not be able to address things and actors and all of those as quickly as you could, with having some type of closed posture.
Great. I actually have a question on a different angle that I'm curious to hear, is about your experience as an ambassador in the CNCF and as a member, not specifically Falco project, but in general, because it's such an amazing benefit, obviously, for all of us as a community, and also it's so elaborate an organization. How do you, what's the day in life, and how do you leverage that in your everyday activities? And I know you do so much, so you take the pick on what you want to focus on.
I love that I have the opportunity. And what I mean by that is CNCF allows that to all of the ambassadors, or also the community members. Anybody can do this. Anybody can go start a podcast. Anybody, you don't have to be an ambassador to be a representative of this amazing community, right? I'm going to tell you that right now. However, like, again, is people giving their time for the common good, for this, to be able to progress amazing projects. And again, shameless plug for the podcast. It's like when which podcast pop follow. So basically, what I did with that was trying to like connect people, and that's what I do with this, connect people behind the code, to people to understand. Julius Valls, fantastic example. Prometheus, he talked about this, starting, there was a problem he solved, and being able to tell that story, that to me is every member of the community out there. And that's what I think like we should do, is be able to tell these stories of how you address the problem out there, right? And be able to share those. And so being a CNCF, being part of the CNCF is wonderful, because it's diverse, it's inclusive. Nobody, you feel like, you can contribute, even if you're like a student. Like, again, we did something recently with students where like people like, how do you contribute, and doing all those things. I'm proud of that, like being able to like get people involved and all of that. So, yeah.
Yeah, great. By the way, guys, again, you have an opportunity to ask before we wrap up. So if you have any questions, do feel free to drop them both or either in YouTube or on the Slack channel, and we'll be glad to take them. I have one maybe additional question regarding eBPF. You mentioned that on the talk. There's a lot of discussion. I discussed it actually on my podcast and in several other discussions that I've had. A lot of excitement around the potential of having this facilitation. And I also posted it on the chat, your contribution with the libraries and to CNCF. Can you tell us a bit more about this contribution and the potential beyond specifically the context that you talked about? Because essentially it opens up a whole range of, as you said, capabilities that can be plugged in kernel level, obviously in a safe manner.
We believe so strongly that the future of open source is, future security is open, right? We gave our crown jewels, right? I mean, the contribution to the crown jewels of how Sysdig was able to do this, dissemination through our libs to the CNCF, because we feel strongly that, like, being able to have other people out there take those libs and just create amazing ways for folks to secure the world, to me, is a much more impactful way to do that. And so, like, you can extend by writing scripts, and then like looking into this, and and also like making sure that you're keeping this from a stable perspective. So instead of having somebody from scratch have to build all this nuance, you can use this basis. And we have, there's a ton of companies out there that are using this as a basis going forward. As again, how I feel about this, and this is my own opinion, I feel like what Kubernetes is to distributed computing, I feel Falco should be for runtime security, without a shadow of a doubt, because it should be the basis for folks to create even more amazing things on top of it. And that includes the libs that we donated. So to me, it's again, enabling more folks to not have to like start from scratch on creating a secure kind of behavioral engine. You already have this. You can create even more amazing things on top of it. And so if we're enabling the ecosystem in our own way, then that's fantastic. And again, shout out to you, Dotan, as well, for being so supportive of that. Again, that's another thing what I love about the community. Like, you were in other communities. I remember in the past I was in things like OpenStack. It was like pulling teeth to get anybody to talk about anything. Like, I'm like, I was like, Dotan, what do you think of this? It's like, oh, this is awesome. I'm so supportive of this. So again, appreciate it you for doing that.
No, it's really amazing. And again, I keep on hearing so many potential use cases, which is really exciting. I think we're going to wrap up unless there are any other last questions. I would very much like if you can maybe later post on the Slack channel the blog post that you mentioned. I think this would be a very interesting resource for people to follow up on the talk with many details, also on the step-by-step that people can actually run. So really useful, and that'd be great. And any other useful resource that you have, we'll post them on the Slack channel. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. We'll soon post details about the upcoming meetup. Sorry. And in the meantime, if you have any suggestions for talks, for topics, or anything else, please reach out. You can reach out via the Slack channel or on the community.cncf.io, or reach out to me at Horowitz on Twitter, or whichever way you like. We're more than happy to get the feedback. Another thing that we're looking into is going back to the physical events, especially here in Israel, as things improved. So if you have any take on that, maybe we'll post something formal about that. But in the meantime, any feedback on that would be more than great. And really
next year I'm coming, Dotan. Next year I'm going to come hang out with you.
No worries. Different cookies. Next time I want different type of cookies. The tahini is fine, but I have some other great recipes.
Okay.
From my grandmother.
it's a date. I want your grandmother's cookies, man.
You bet. You bet. So you can also propose your cookies, by the way, on the Slack channel and everything else. And again, if you have any feedback, both about the physical events, the live events, topics that you'd like to raise, or anything else, do reach out to us. And the recording of the meetup will also be available on the YouTube channel, as well as, by the way, past meetup. So if you are interested, OPA that was mentioned here on the discussion, or others, we had very interesting meetups on them. So check them out as well. And thank you very much, Dan, again, and check out Dan's podcast as well. Also highly recommended. And thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thanks for having me. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.